We've reached our first clearing. Over the last 3 episodes, we've laid out some pretty heavy arguments about the world that we're building. We looked at the extraction of human attention, the collapse of our private spaces, and the industrialization of our tribal instincts. In this episode, I want to pause the chronological journey. Every fourth episode or so, I want to use this clearing to step back, look at the counter-arguments, and defend the ground that we've covered. Because if we just stack up observations week after week without testing them, the weight can start to feel passive. It can start to feel like a checklist of complaints. And if I'm being completely transparent with you, this show is probably still finding its voice. We're only 4 episodes into this project, and I'm still figuring out the best way to pace these thoughts. But I think that's the only honest way to do this. I'm not reading to you from an academic textbook or a polished corporate script. I'm just sorting through these questions out loud, thinking through the very systems and infrastructure I spent 25 years living inside and helping to build. This is firsthand territory for me. I was there, and I'm still trying to make sense of what we did. An intelligent skeptic might look at everything we've discussed so far and ask a very reasonable question. Haven't people always panicked about new technology? And the honest answer is yes, they absolutely have. Every single generation mistakes a change in culture for the end of the world. People panicked about the printing press. They claimed the radio would destroy the art of conversation. They argued that comic books and rock and roll would rot the brains of the youth. So it is vital that we approach these matters with humility, not absolute certainty. I'm not interested in pretending the past was a perfect, unblemished paradise where everybody sat on the front porch playing guitar like they did in Mayberry. History was often brutal, lonely, and remarkably hard. But recognizing the immense benefits of modern life shouldn't keep us from looking clearly at the specific mechanics of its costs. Because what we are facing today isn't just a new tool, it's an entire new methodology of managing human reality. Think about how a modern talking point actually works. In the physical world, if you want to understand a complex problem, whether it's local water management, a shift in the economy, or a breakdown in some community institution, you have to spend time in the gray areas. Real life lives almost entirely in the gray. It requires patience. It requires looking at conflicting data, sitting with uncertainty, and listening to people you might not naturally agree with. Nuance requires sustained attention. There's simply no shortcut around that. But as we've discussed, our modern digital environments have fractured our attention spans into hundreds of tiny pieces. We've been conditioned to crave speed, stimulation, and immediate emotional resolution. And when a population loses the capacity to hold its focus on a complex reality for more than a few seconds, it becomes entirely dependent on simplified, highly activated inputs. And that's the exact soil where this post-reality world takes root. When you can no longer focus long enough to investigate the truth of a claim, the system adapts by replacing truth with repetition. If a talking point, a slogan, or a specific lie is repeated over and over again across every feed, every screen, and every broadcast, it begins to wear a psychological groove into our collective consciousness. Eventually, the statement stops being evaluated by whether it matches reality. It becomes familiar. And to the human nervous system, familiarity feels a lot like truth. Once a talking point reaches that level of repetition, it undergoes a dangerous transformation. It stops being an opinion you hold and becomes a uniform you wear. It attaches itself directly to your tribal identity. You represent the line not because you've studied the facts, but because repeating it signals to your group that you are loyal, that you are safe, and that you are standing on the correct side of this invisible line in the room. And the moment a talking point becomes an identity marker, the gray areas are completely eradicated. Everything collapses into black or white. You're either with us or you are the enemy. Complex human problems are reduced to simple caricatures. The subtlety of honest conversation is viewed as a form of weakness or, even worse, a betrayal of your tribe. We see this happening regardless of the reality on the ground. A lie can be completely dismantled by evidence on a Monday, but if the machine keeps repeating it through Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, the evidence ceases to really matter. The narrative warfare becomes the only reality that registers. And honestly, that is exactly what concerns me the most about the world that we are handing down. This conversation isn't ultimately about personal peace of mind. It isn't about digital detoxing or finding quiet hobbies to escape the noise. It boils down to something much more serious. Will our children and the 2 or 3 generations coming up behind them possess the cognitive stamina, the patience, and the shared reality required to solve the very massive physical problems hovering on the horizon? You cannot build a bridge, repair a local ecosystem, maintain a functioning neighborhood, or negotiate a necessary compromise with a population that has been trained to experience reality through a continuous loop of repeated lies and emotional outrage. Cooperation requires a baseline of shared truth. It requires the capacity to sit across a physical table from somebody, recognize the gray areas of a problem together, and work through the friction without collapsing into warfare. If we allow our attention to be entirely extracted, and if we normalize an environment where performance matters more than participation, we are leaving the next generation completely defenseless against a psychological manipulation. We are handing them an advanced civilization while quietly erasing the exact human capacities required to keep it from breaking apart. Before I close, I'd like to once again leave you with something small to notice this week. Pay close attention to the phrases and slogans that come out of your own mouth during a casual conversation about the state of the world. When you express an opinion, look at it closely just for 10 seconds. Ask yourself, is that an insight arrived at through my own direct observation, or is it a prepackaged talking point that was handed to you by an environment designed to keep you reactive? Just notice the origin of the words. It is a small, quiet act of sovereignty. But reclaiming our attention always begins by simply noticing where we've allowed it to drift. I hope this episode helped you slow down long enough to notice your own life. And if you think someone else might appreciate this kind of conversation, I hope you'll pass it along to them. I'm William Cardy. Thanks for being here. I'll see you next time.